everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I got a lot to get to, so if you do call the program, be prepared to wait a while. I'm just giving you a heads up. Now we move on to freedom of the press, which, as I hear it, is under great threat in this country. The Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, all of them. Great threat from this administration. The freedom of the press. How so, you might ask? Well, there's actually a good piece at the Daily Wire on this subject by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Curl. So let's first lay this out, and then I want to lay out something else that you haven't heard today. To hear the liberal media tell it, the horrible Trump administration, bent on destroying the First Amendment, has barred a legitimate journalist from covering the White House. Or as the New York Times put it, the White House barred a CNN journalist from attending a public appearance by President Trump in the Rose Garden on Wednesday, an apparent act of retaliation that drew immediate rebuke from news organizations and signaled the latest escalation of Mr. Trump's hostilities toward the news media. Once again, that's not the full story. And just for the record, a lie of omission is still a lie. The Times quotes Caitlin Collins, a White House correspondent for CNN, saying she was chastised for asking inappropriate questions. We played this yesterday, didn't we, Mr. Producer? And they did not like the questions I asked President Trump about the news of the day, Collins said. That, she claimed, led to the White House barring her from the following press event in the White House Rose Garden. But White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders offered a very different account. She says that's actually not what happened. At the conclusion of a press event in the Oval Office, a reporter shouted questions and refused to leave, despite repeatedly being asked to do so, Sanders said in a statement. Subsequently, our staff informed her she was not welcome to participate in the next event, but made clear that any other journalist from her network could attend. Do you see how the media humiliate themselves? Do you see how the media lie? And immediately, and I pointed this out yesterday, Fox and other news organizations circled the wagons around CNN. They didn't want to be left out. They didn't want to be seen as not supporting the First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This has nothing to do with freedom of speech. Inquiries are not being shut down. Questions are not being shut down. This young lady was disruptive. You can't have that in a newsroom. You can't have that on a football field. You can't have it in a classroom. You can't have it in a courthouse. You can't have it at a congressional hearing. You can ask questions. You can ask tough questions. But wait your turn. Right place, right time. It's not as if the media aren't free to cover Donald Trump. They don't stop covering Donald Trump. So subsequently, our staff informed her she wasn't welcome to participate in the next event. Now, of course, the she refused to lead part wasn't reported by the media. Far different from the versions you're hearing in the mainstream media, and Collins herself noted that CNN wasn't barred from the event. She said on CNN that she was told, we're not banning your network, your photographers can still come, your producers can still come, but you are not invited to the Rose Garden today. Now, the Times reports that in the Oval Office, Collins shouted, did Michael Cohen betray you, Mr. President? And then, Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is about to say to prosecutors? Actually, she asked 6 questions. 6. But it wasn't the questions she asked, it was the venue. Quote, to be clear, we support a free press and ask that everyone be respectful of the presidency and guests at the White House, Sanders said. Trump had just concluded an Oval Office meeting with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker in the White House when the press was allowed in. Having covered the White House for 12 years, he says, I know a bit about this. To be sure, reporters do yell questions at the president all the time, say on the White House lawn, at Andrews Air Force Base, in a White House press conference, or just about anywhere other than the Oval Office, he says. And it's not only right for them to do so, it's their job, one the American people expect them to do. In the Oval Office, though, reporters are expected to handle themselves with a bit of decorum. It's the man's office, after all, and the press was invited in. Yelling repeated questions at the president and refusing to leave is absolutely inappropriate. Collins asked the fifth question twice, so 6 questions. In an Oval Office spray, that's what they call it apparently, it's cool to ask 1 question, maybe a second on your way out, but 6? And you can watch the video yourself, folks. Just as fellow CNN White House correspondent Jim Acosta has been doing since day one of the Trump administration, Collins is clearly trying to get famous by being tough on the president. But she's not being tough. She's being rude. Ask a question, maybe 2, and then get out. So now that's a new tactic by the press. Get into the Oval Office, then simply refuse to leave. When Trump tires of the tactic, and he will, and bars the entire press corps from his office, then the mainstream media will be up in arms. And when that happens, they should perhaps direct some of their ire towards Collins and Acosta. There's a way to do the job, a very difficult job, without being rude. Give it a try, White House press corps. You just might like it. No, you don't understand. Trump is threatening freedom of the press. What a pathetic joke. I want to remind you of Barack Obama in the Rose Garden, June 15, 2012, with a reporter by the name of Neil Monroe, working for the Daily Caller at the time. How Obama cut him off and shut him down, and the media agreed with him. No circling the wagons around Mr. Monroe. Cut 1, go.
It is the right thing to do. Excuse me, sir. It's not time for questions, sir. Not while I'm speaking. And the answer to your question, sir, and the next time I prefer you let me finish my statements before you ask that question, is this is the right thing to do for the American people. Baby, I didn't ask for an argument. I'm answering your question. It is the right thing to do for the American people, and here's why. Here's the reason. Because these young people are going to make extraordinary contributions.
And Mr. Producer, he dug and dug and dug. And I want you to listen to this montage as a result of Neil Monroe questioning a different president, Obama, in the Rose Garden. Not about federal prosecutors, not about his private attorney, about actual policy issues, may I add. And guess what? Monroe's interruption was racist. Cut 2, go.
It's very, very difficult to place race outside of this context. Certainly, in my experience, it's hard to divorce that because this president doesn't look like the others.
And I think a lot of the same thing is happening with our attorney general. We've got these are 2 men who are doing an outstanding job. But there are folks who just don't like it, and they've never treated other folks like this. But here they are doing it to these gentlemen.
Is it because they're both black?
I think that probably has something to do with it.
This disrespect of this human being cannot be disconnected from the fact that he's black.
You have to ask the question, would the right wing be doing this if we had a white president there?
And any person who doesn't believe that race plays some role in that is floating down a river of denial.
Wow. Race again. It's race. I don't remember news organizations putting out statements defending Neil Monroe, do you? And he wasn't in the Oval Office. The time wasn't cut off. Obama wasn't with another foreign leader. He wasn't being asked about prosecutors and such investigating him, because that never happened, of course, because he's Obama and they'd never do that. But he was asked a policy question. April Ryan on CNN Today, a leftist. Cut 3, go.
But then CNN had that exclusive with those Cohen-Trump tapes. They were angry. Yeah. They were angry. And now this. There is retaliation. And this administration doesn't look good. This president was sworn in, taking the oath of office to support the Constitution. In the First Amendment, the very First Amendment is freedom of the press. Yeah. He is violating his oath. This is not good.
This is a reporter, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sure she cares deeply about the Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the Appointments Clause, and Article 5, Convention of States. No, she doesn't. I love the way the left throws around the Constitution. I even love the way the media throw around freedom of the press. There's other parts in the First Amendment that they don't even believe in, like religious liberty. Then there's Wolf Blitzer, yesterday on CNN. Cut 4, go.
I mean, it's something you would expect to see in some totalitarian regime.
Ah, there we go. I'm surprised he didn't say Hitler's Third Reich. All because we have another CNN reporter who's utterly unprofessional. Go ahead.
With presidents around the world at photo opportunities, that the host government wasn't happy that White House correspondents were shouting questions. They weren't happy about that.
Look, moron, everybody knows what's going on here. Everybody knows what's going on. It was in the Oval Office. Question time was over. And your reporter was unprofessional, was disruptive, lobbing 6 questions at the President of the United States. She wouldn't leave the Oval Office. Somebody ought to try that with Wolf Blitzer in the studio on air. Start lobbing questions at him and refuse to leave and say, hey, I can do this. I believe in freedom of speech. Freedom of speech. You can't throw me out. What are you, a tyrant with a totalitarian mindset? They love the Constitution, except when it comes to most of it. Separation of powers, the Second Amendment. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Hilarious, isn't it? When Neil Monroe in 2012 did what he did, CBS News took note. Quote, during President Obama's event in the White House Rose Garden on the administration's new immigration rules regarding children of undocumented immigrants, a reporter interrupted the president mid-sentence with the question, is it the right thing to do for American workers? Interrupting the president is considered a violation of decorum and is rarely done. This is CBS. The reporter, Neil Monroe, the conservative website, The Daily Caller, said after the event he was asking questions because you guys weren't. So they chastise him. Chastise him. ABC News. Barack Obama's campaign, this is in 2008, has booted from its airplane 3 reporters who work for newspapers that have endorsed John McCain. Anybody accuse Barack Obama of being a tyrant? Of wanting to run a totalitarian regime? The campaign says that a limited number of seats forced it to make the tough decision of which journalists would be permitted, so he gets rid of the conservatives. Gets rid of them. And by the way, Glamour magazine and others were allowed to stay on the plane. Just thought you'd want to know, Mr. First Amendment. Then I looked up and I followed this piece by James Risen of the New York Times. If Donald Trump targets journalists, thank Obama. What? What? Oh, yeah. More on that when I return.
Mark Levin.